The fiscal 2022 National Defense Authorization Act has passed, but Congress has yet to pass the annual appropriations bill, meaning the Defense Department is still operating under a continuing resolution. My guest says that the failure to pass a budget has dire implications for national security. Retired Marine Corps Major General Arnold Punaro is chairman of the board of the National Defense Industrial Association. He's the author of the book, The Ever-Shrinking Fighting Force. General, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here, Mimi.
So, as I said, the appropriations bill hasn't passed, and it's February. We're still under a continuing resolution. What's the root of the problem?
Well, the root of the problem is Congress has failed to do its job, and they failed to do their job at a time when the world is probably more dangerous and unstable than any time I can remember in the almost 50-plus years I've been working in the national security arena. We've got external and internal threats, and those risks are only greatly increased because Congress has failed to pass the defense bill, and at a time when we need increased deterrence. If we look at what's going on with Russia and China. China's on the march, Russia's on the move, North Korea's on the advance, Iran's on the verge, inflation's on the rise, and the Department of Defense is losing close to $6 billion a month in purchasing power under the continuing resolution. As you mentioned, we're all into February.
I do want to talk to you about purchasing power, but you've previously served as a top staffer on the Senate Armed Services Committee. So you saw what was going on inside of Congress. What's the solution? Give me some specifics.
Well, the specifics are, first of all, on a bipartisan basis, the authorizing committees, the Senate and House Armed Services Committee, have sent to the president. He signed into law the fiscal year, as you mentioned, 22 Authorization Act at $790 billion, which is $36 billion higher than the level we're currently under in the continuing resolution. And that's the model for the appropriation process. The appropriators, if you left it to Pat Leahy, Dick Shelby, Rosa DeLauro, and Kay Granger, they'd fix this in a heartbeat. But the leadership is involved, and there are those that are advocating to keep a flat budget because they think gridlock helps in the mid-years. Anybody that thinks an FY21 flat level is better than an increase of $36 billion didn't pass fourth grade arithmetic. So basically, the Congress has got to do its job, and they have to do it right away. We've only got 18 days before the CR runs out, and they still don't have a deal.
You know, you've said that China's purchasing power is greater than that of the U.S. Explain that.
Well, China gets more for their yuan than we get for our buck. If you look at where we are right now in constant dollars in the Department of Defense, assuming that, we pass the appropriation bill, we are higher in constant dollars than the peak of the Reagan buildup, and yet the force is 50% smaller. That's because we've had this huge increase in the overhead in the Department of Defense, we've had large increases in the cost of our major weapons, and we've had large personnel increases, none of which China has to deal with, quite frankly. And therefore, for example, they have one shipyard in China that can produce 11 naval combatants a year, which is greater than all of our for-profit shipyards can do. So we've allowed China to get a march on us. We still have the same force structure in the Pacific that we had in the year 2000, and yet we claim that we're involved in a pivot to the Pacific. So, we're not keeping up.
What do we do about that? I mean, how do we bring those costs down? How do we improve our purchasing power so we are getting more bang for the buck?
Well, the first thing you've got to do is pass the funding bill. Without funding, basically, if we have this go for a whole year, the DOD is going to lose $100 billion in funds, and that covers the entire department. It covers the intelligence agency, including the CIA and NSA that are keeping up, trying to advise our leadership on what Russia's up to and China's up to. It affects the warfighting commands, the European command that deals with Russia, Indo-Pacific. And so the bottom line is Congress needs to do its job, and they need to improve oversight so that we get more bang for the buck for the dollars we spend.
All right, well, we've talked about Congress doing their job. What do you recommend to senior Pentagon leaders?
I think the senior Pentagon leaders have got to basically understand that they're spending the taxpayers' dollars. This is not their money. I hate to say this, but I've been around government long enough to know that people in government don't have an appreciation of the value of time or the value of money. And when you look at the cost of the new weapon systems, at the cost of personnel, the deferred compensation we pay for people, we have 2.4 million retirees and only 1.3 million people serving on active duty. The healthcare budget in DOD is $52 billion a year, with 10 million beneficiaries, of which 5.6 million are retirees and their dependents. And so we've got to look at the overall whole And the Pentagon leaders have got to be willing to make, they always say we're going to make some tough decisions. We're going to get rid of old weapon systems. But again, we're spending more in constant dollars than the peak of the Reagan buildup, and the force is 50% smaller. So our military leaders need to change that direction.
General, do you think the DoD is prepared for a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine or even a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan?
So I'm not involved in the day-to-day intelligence, but I will tell you right now that we've put, 8,000 or 9,000 troops on alert of the 1.3 million active duty people we have. That's no match for what Russia has arrayed on 3 flanks of Ukraine. 2, as I said, we've not increased our force structure in the Pacific while China has quadrupled their force structure, rattling the saber against Taiwan. They beefed up their amphibious shipping capability. They beefed up their subsurface capability. They beefed up their long-range missiles. They're definitely threatening the independence of Taiwan. So our military needs to basically, again, we're giving them plenty of money. It may be that they just need to get it refocused in the right areas. We're not going to go head-to-head with Russia. The president and our military leaders have already said that. The other problem we're having is, the question of deterrence. I mean, Germany basically has totally capitulated because they've lost energy independence. They depend on Russia for their energy, and there's one of the richest countries in NATO. They don't even meet their own NATO obligations. So when Russia looks at NATO, he sees some pretty big gaps. So again, all these things need to be corrected.
All right. Well, General, thank you so much for coming in. Nice talking to you.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.